So one of the tellers at my bank called me and told me that a customer had dropped off a bunch of rolls of pennies and they'd be there waiting for me if I wanted them. I've been trying to establish a good relationship with the bank and with the tellers. We've been getting along really well. I've left them my phone number, but this is the first time they've actually called me. So I went in and now we got some pennies to hunt. Hey everybody, this is James and you're watching my channel CAD Roll Hunter. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. But we're going to hunt some pennies. I'm really excited about these ones because when I take a look at them, well, I can see an American. I can see definitely there's some older pennies here. But when I look at this one, there's some really exciting stuff. I see a King George VI Ender. And I see some, what look like maybe some BU, maybe 70s or 80s, 70s perhaps. So I'm excited to get in these rolls. I thought I saw on here a Laureate Portrait Ender, and when I just peeked at the other side, it's a Laureate Portrait on the other side too. So there might be all sorts of really good stuff in these rolls. So we got to get in them and find out. I got the copper cup here. I expect we're going to have a lot of copper in these rolls. It doesn't look like there might be too much new stuff. Anything in Canadian pennies older than 1997 is pure copper. And so that's going to go in the cup. Of course, we'll put on the board anything that we find that is interesting. Let's get in them. Roll number one, partway through the roll. And so far, everything is copper. And here is maybe one of the nicest examples of a red, mostly uncirculated, or AU cent. It's a 1977. Of course, I've got my scope here, so I'm going to be scoping anything to see if there are any errors or varieties, anything interesting we're hoping that might be in these rolls. But that's a pretty nice 1977. And I'm just setting aside some of the ones here that still have some red on them. I'll go through and I will set aside the ones that are the best. You can see this one is better than these ones over here, but hopefully we'll find some real goodies like this and maybe some that are older too. The next coin in the roll is a 1985 in pretty good shape, but we want to scope this, of course, just to be sure it is not the pointed 5 rare variety. This one happens to be the blunt 5. You can see the blunt 5 there. The pointed 5 comes to a point, and that is a rare one. I'll post a link to a video where I found my first ever pointed 5. I'll put that up in the corner for you to see. Same roll, and I've got a Centennial commemorative penny with the rock dove on it. And of course, we want to check to see if there's any doubling on the date. And we want to check on the obverse to see if there's any doubling on Regina, which there is not, but that's something we're going to keep checking for. Still in roll number one, and here is another really nice looking one. This one's a 1978. So we'll throw this one under the scope and see if there's any doubling on that date. And there isn't here, but that's a pretty nice example we'll keep on the board. And we found our first Laureate Portrait. It's a 1962. And there we go. There she is right there. We'll add that to the board. I'll scope all of the 50s and 60s that might have the hanging number variety. If I put this one under the scope, what we're looking for is a die clash that was very common. It would look like a little hanger almost attached to the top of the number. So I'll be looking to see if I can find any of those. It's harder in poorer condition coins like this one, but if we find anything that might be in BU condition, it'd be easier to see. I also see that we've got a 1965 here, and we'll want to check that to see if it's got the small beads or the large beads and the pointed or the blunt 5. So we'll take a look at this under the scope as well. So we looked at the 5 here. This is not the pointed 5, though it looks on an angle. The pointed 5 in the 1965 is actually quite a bit more acute of an angle. And then for the large or small beads, we want to look at the A in a Regina to see if it's pointing at or between a bead. And it looks like this is pointing between two beads. And so that is probably the small bead. Roll number two, and we got our first American penny, and it's just a 1980 Denver, but it looks to be in pretty decent shape. And this one is also copper, so 82, and earlier are copper. Of course, we have to weigh the 82s because that's when they transition to zinc. So I've got my handy scale here as well. But that's got lots of great detail. It's going to go in the copper pile, but I might check it to see if it will upgrade in my album. But of course, I'm really hoping to find some red cents for that. Same roll, and there's a really nice looking 1978. We'll also throw that one under the scope and see if it's got any of the doubling, and it does not. Roll number 2, we'll have our second Laureate Portrait penny this time. It's a 1964. Same roll, and I've just pulled a 1979 under the scope, and you can see it's got that doubling on the 9, the 7, the 9, and then you can see it along the tip of the leaf as well. That's a great example. It's still got some redness on it, but it's got some spotting and toning as well. But that's a definite keeper and an interesting coin. Right behind it, another Laureate Portrait. This one, another 1964. Same roll, another 1964. A little further back, we got another one here. And that is another 1964. And right behind it, a really nice looking 1980. And here we've got our first penny from the 50s. It's a 1959. That's a great find, another Laureate Portrait. So that's our oldest coin of the hunt so far, but we know we've got something older because there's a King George VI ender. Roll number 3, we've got another Laureate Portrait. I wonder if this one might be older. It looks a little bit more worn than some of the other ones we've been seeing. And it's not, it's just a worn 1964. Roll number 4, and this is our double Laureate ender. And so this one is 1956. So this is now our oldest. And we'll check the ender on the other end. And it is a 1961, our first of that. I can see as the other one fell off the end here, it's also a Laureate Portrait, a 1964. So we're hoping there's going to be a bunch of older stuff in these rolls, in this roll particularly perhaps. Still in that roll, I'm finding more Laureate Portrait and, interestingly enough, our first zinc Canadian cent, a 1998. But we've also got our first King George VI. It is a 1952, so that's a great addition to the board. Next up, we've got another Laureate Portrait. This one, a 1955, our first 55 of the hunt. And that means we can check it for a few things. I've put it under the scope, and we can even see, even in this condition, that there is the shoulder fold. So it's the common variety. And if we weren't sure, what we would do is just look at the eye in Die Gratia to see if it is more flared. The more flared version of the eye is the no shoulder fold. And in the 1955, that would be the rare variety. This is the common 1955 shoulder fold, but a 1955 is one we hadn't gotten yet. Well, it looks like this roll is going to yield a lot of finds. I pulled out this 1963, but I could see right behind it, we have another King George VI, a 1951. And behind that, a 1962. And then another King George VI, this one, a 1942. Now our oldest of the hunt. And still lots of great detail on that one. That's looking pretty good. It's got some dirt and stuff, but if I can get it to focus. But that's still a great find in a roll of pennies from the bank. A little further back, we got another oldie, a 1945, and then right behind that, we've got another one. It looks like we've got a series, a 1952, 1945. We got a Laureate Portrait here, another 1964. And just a couple coins back, there's another 1963, and I see a 61, and then something really shiny. So a 2019 Denver. So I'm not sure who put these rolls together, where they came from, because we got a lot of old stuff with even some new stuff. Again, there's another 1964, a 51 George. This one is another 64, a 62, a 63, and another 64. And we're going to have more at the end of this roll. There's another 1951, and then a 1961, and then we've got a 64, a 60, a 64 with a little bit of mint luster still on it, another 64, and a 1962 in really nice condition. It's brown, but it doesn't have a lot of circulation wear on it. It is actually in pretty decent shape. So that was a great roll, and we still have lots to go. We've got a US 1982 large date here, and what we can do is put it on the scale and see if it weighs up as copper or as zinc. And in this case, it is copper. Just at the end of roll number 6, and we're going to find something here. This time it's another 1963. Roll number 7, we've got ourselves another 1964. Roll number 8, we're going to have one in pretty uncirculated condition, but some nice toning. It's a 1978. We'll throw that up and see if there's any doubling on the date. There isn't. And right behind that, we had another one, really nice looking one, another 1980. Roll number 9, and we're going to have something, I think this is a Laureate Portrait with a lot of corrosion. You can barely make it out. It's pretty worn, and yeah, can hardly see what's going on here. I'll throw it under the scope and see if we can see a date on it. It's just a really terrible looking 1964. A little further back, here's one in better shape. That's a 1963. Roll number 10, we're going to have another 1962. Same roll, we got another brilliant 1981 to add to our stack of mostly uncirculated coins. And right at the end of roll number 10, we got another Laureate Portrait, another 64. Just pulled out roll number 11, and we got some really corroded ends, and by the look of it, they might not even be old ones. There's some corrosion I can see on a bright and shiny towards the end, so this looks like it's a little bit of a different mix than what we've had in the other ones. As it appeared, most of those really damaged coins were newer ones exhibiting zinc rot, is what they call it. And here we've got another 1962 Laureate Portrait here. So we found a bunch. I'm hoping to find some older stuff yet. Are we going to find any more George VI outside of that ender we've got in there? I've just laid out roll number 12, and we are going to have a US wheat penny. It's a 1952 out of Philadelphia. If I flip it over, there are our wheat ears. So our first wheat cent, we're hoping for more. Well, no sooner do I call for more, and there is another one right there. I just sort of knocked these ones off inadvertently. And that's a pretty nice looking 1976. We'll just set that aside. But we've got another wheat cent right here. And this is older. This is a 1944 out of Philadelphia. Same roll, and we're going to have another Laureate Portrait 1964. And just a bit further back, another Laureate Portrait with some nice detail. This one is a 1963. This is probably our nicest one. It's still got a bit of luster. It's still a little bit of red-brown on there. Same roll, we got a really nice red 1976 US cent. And just behind that, we've got another wheat penny. This is our third. This one, a 1947 Philadelphia. Got some corrosion on it. But that is our third wheat penny of the hunt. Same roll, I got a 1969 under the scope. And when we have a closer look, we can see that it has the double 9 variety. Probably some die deterioration on these ones with the double dates. But I always look for these because sometimes they can be really, really dramatic. It's not the case on this one, but I'm always looking for ones that are really interesting. I grabbed roll number 13, and this is our King George ender. I just opened up the other end, and there's a 1963, so we've got a Laureate Portrait in there. So hoping there might be some real goodies inside this one. All right, I've laid that down, and there do seem to be some newer shiny things in here, and I can see some Americans. But here's our 1963 ender. And right behind that, we've got a 56. So we're going to find some old stuff for sure. That's a Laureate Portrait. There's a 64. And a first year Elizabeth 1953. And I put that 53 up under the scope to see if it is the shoulder fold or no shoulder fold. The shoulder fold is the more rare one. It doesn't appear from the shoulder that there's a fold here, but of course we can check by looking at the eye up here. And this has the flared eye, so this is the more common no shoulder fold 1953. And we're going to have more in this roll because we've got a 62 and another 64 here. Same roll, and this time it's another 64. And just a couple coins behind there, we're going to find an interesting American one. This is one of the 2009s featuring Abraham Lincoln. This shows him in his youth, apparently reading a book. And this one is out of Philadelphia. I'm not even sure if I've got this one, so I'm going to set this aside and see if it adds to my collection. Same roll, and we've got another Laureate Portrait. This one is another 1964. Just a couple coins back, another 1963. All right, I got that 63 under the scope. I wanted to show you this because I think we have found the 1963 hanging 3 variety. There was a die clash that made this impression. Now, at this angle right here, it almost looks like that was scratched onto the coin. That's what I originally thought. But as I move it around, you'll see it actually, it's not scratched so bright when I just turn it. But you can see where that die clash here goes right from the 3. And actually on the other side of the 3, it looks like maybe not quite, all the way to the leaf, which is what we would see. And it's just the way the light was reflecting off at that angle. But that is the 1963 hanging 3. And that's a great find. I've never actually found one. And at some angles, it appears that that mark almost completely disappears. And at this angle, it looks a little bit more bright. So I'm going to take a closer look at the other ones that we've found just and rotate them like this, because in some angles that hanging die clash is almost invisible, and you can see it's really easy to see here. Same roll, another 64. A little further back we got a 1962, and one of the things that I'm always looking for on this 62s is the harp or guitar variety, which has lines coming down from the 1 towards the leaf. So that's another thing you can look for. It obviously isn't common because I haven't found one yet, but that's something you can look for as well. And the last 3 coins of that roll are going to be 3 50s pennies, 2 Elizabeth Laureate Portrait 59s, and that 1951 Ender King George VI. Roll 14, another 1963. And just further back, we've got a 1974 nice red cent. I really love the fact that we're saving these from destruction, because these would just be collected and melted down. And it would seem to be such a shame to let that happen to some 40s and 50s coins that, are just hard to come by. So that's why we do it. And maybe we'll find something interesting and valuable along the way. You never know. And just behind that one, another older Elizabeth, and this one is another 1956. Same roll, and we've got our nicest 1967 Centennial Commemorative penny. I put it under the scope, and there's no doubling on the date that I can see or on Canada. But when I flip it over and look at the back, and you can see there's some fingerprint marks, there is some minor doubling on the lettering. You can see it at the top of the I and around the G and the N. You can see sort of a double serif there. It's not as pronounced as some of the ones that we found, and I'll leave a link up in the top corner to the video where I found 25 of these in 2 rolls. But this is a really minor version, and you can do on the I and the N particularly, you can see it. Let's just look at the other lettering on the other side. You don't often see it on Elizabeth, but no. So that looks to be a minor version of the double die. Same roll, and I got a 79 on screen here, and you can see there is doubling on that 9. So that's the 1979 double 9. Roll number 17, and we've got another 1964. This might be about our 20th, so if I find any more, I probably won't show those, and we'll just focus on other interesting finds. Of course, if it's obverse facing, we won't really know what it is until we flip it over. So let's see, this is a 1962 with a really nice looking 1981 right behind it. Roll number 18, now we're talking. Roll number 19, and we got ourselves another really nice copper 70s penny. And a little further back, a bright and shiny 1980. Last roll, and we found another 1979 with some pretty significant doubling on the last 2 digits and a little bit on the first 9. Halfway through that last roll, and we're at least going to have one more find here, because here's another Laureate Portrait. That's a 56, and there's one right behind it. And that one is another 64. And we're still going. There's another 1962. Okay, so we've concluded another 20 roll Canadian penny hunt, and it was a fun hunt for sure. We found all sorts of great stuff, of course, starting with this dime, so that was a good start. I took out all of the best and shiniest of the pennies that were here from any year. I'll look through these and see which are the best to roll up. Some of these might be worthy and some might not, but I picked out the ones that had the most amount of luster. And I picked out a couple of the newer ones here. There were some 99s and 2000s that looked particularly good, so I set them aside as well. Otherwise, we found 59 Laureate Portrait pennies. So you can see here, starting with the 53, the 55, we got a few 56s, a few 59s, a 60, some 61s, and then we start to get a lot here in 62 and 63. In the 62, we got two that were hanging twos, and in 63, we got two hanging threes. I looked through all of them afterwards just to see if I hadn't missed any, and I had. And we found a whole bunch of 1964s as well. But not only that, we found 9 King George VI. There you can see a 42, some 45s, some 51s, a 52. And we found some wheat pennies, a 44, a 52, and I think that is a 47 at the end. A 47, by the way, I don't have in my collection, so that's going to go into my binder. We also found a 2009, one of the Lincoln commemorative coins, so I pulled that aside. And we also found a pretty nice looking red 1976. So that was another great hunt, and of course at the back here, those 3 cups on the right are all copper, and that last cup on the left is just the Canadian zinc and steel. So we didn't find very many at all newer coins. This was mostly pre-steel and zinc. So I hope you enjoyed this hunt. Please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, CAD Roll Hunter, please do that so you can see all of my videos as they come out. I'm regularly releasing new content. Thank you so much for stopping in. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.